It is John Hansen, just known as the fantasy guru and a guy who spends time with Ross Tucker.
Well, this guy, first of all, I think this might be the guru's first appearance on the Dan Patrick Show. I talk to him every week on Sirius XM. He has his own Sirius XM show. We actually did a show together last year on Thursdays. It's on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. More importantly, 21 years this guy has been publishing fantasyguru.com. And when I got into fantasy a couple years ago, I called him out of the blue and I said, dude, please tell me you're doing really well with this, because he was the first guy. I mean, like, and when I say that, he'll say, no, it goes back to the 60s and some Raiders owner or something. It's actually interesting. Guru, it's Ross, it's Paul. It's good to talk with you. Can you tell me, because I said that you pretty much invented fantasy football, but you corrected me, and evidently it goes back to like the old Raiders owner or something?
Yeah, what's up, guys? Happy New Year. The Raider organization is behind the start of fantasy football. It was a minority owner of the Oakland Raiders, Bill Winkenbach, who kind of started it all, and the first ever fantasy draft was held in the early 60s. Ron Wolf was in the league as well, so it goes way back. I actually talked to John Madden about this, and he actually didn't even know that, and he told me, he's like, you know what, now that I think about it, and I'm sorry I have to do something of a Madden impersonation when I do this, now that I think about it, Bill Winkenbach was always asking me about players and the skill sets and all that, and why? Well, he was scouting for his fantasy football team.
Hey, John, I can't tell you how often, and that was not a bad John Madden impersonation. Not the
I
best.
could do much better. I was holding back, guys.
But not bad. Okay. But I cannot tell you, because I work in football, how often people come up to me and want fantasy football advice. And even though I'm playing for the first time this year, I can't really give that good of advice, especially now that we're at the playoff time for a lot of people, the championship coming up. So if you could speak for me and just give the one or two best bits of advice for this very important time of year, please take it away.
Well, try not to suffer from paralysis by overanalysis, really is the most basic piece of advice that I can give. Go with the guys who got you there. Go with the high-end players. Go with the studs. A lot of people in Week 16 benched Todd Gurley, and I said to myself, and I thought about it, certainly a tough matchup, but I had a couple of friends who had this line of decision, by the way, Todd Gurley or Cameron Artis-Payne or someone like that. And I said to him, are you really going to bench a guy in the championship who will be a top 3 pick next year in August? And that is Todd Gurley. Did Todd Gurley go off? No, but the cream tends to rise to the top. The talent tends to get it done, and Todd Gurley did run for, 86 yards, scored a touchdown. So try not to be a hero and think, oh, this is a gut feeling. I'm going to go with this guy because, well, again, my gut's telling me maybe you have stomach pains, and it's not really related to football. Go with what got you there. Don't try to be a hero and go with your best high-end players who are producing currently.
Always love talking to the guru each week, because John Hansen's his real name, but I call him the guru because that is the guy that gives me the advice for my Fantasy Feast podcast league. And now that, Guru, most leagues are over with Week 16, I know some people play into Week 17. By the way, what's your thought on that before I move on?
What, playing in Week 17?
Yeah, playing in Week 17 versus having the season end Week 16. Because at this point, with all the injuries, I mean, is there really that much of a difference? And I think playing in Week 17, there are people that think that adds to the intrigue.
Right. Well, I would argue that Week 16, as you know, and I said this on your radio show on Sirius XM, was the worst week of running backs I've ever seen in 21 years in this business in terms of these situations that are so fluid. We have no idea. The Seattle Seahawks backfield, for example. So you're right in that regard. It's almost like it doesn't even matter. But I don't like playing in Week 17 because we spent all this time in the offseason preparing for our drafts. We work hard to manage our rosters, make all these waiver wire moves. The last thing we want is for an outside situation like a player potentially resting with nothing to play for to destroy your hopes and dreams. But you're right. Some people are kind of sickos in that they enjoy the chaos that Week 17 brings. My advice, end at Week 16. If you want to play another little mini league for Week 17, that can certainly be done, especially now with daily fantasy kind of taking over. You can set up a league on one of these daily sites and do a Week 17 league only. I would not advise playing through Week 17, although some sites like ESPN site, they do the 2-week playoffs, and Week 17 is critical. That's the final week of the finals. They do 16 and 17 for the finals.
So for next year, for me, which will be year 3 of me really being into fantasy football, year 2 for Paul playing, what's the biggest takeaways from this year that we need to use for next year in your mind?
You simply cannot use an early pick on a quarterback. I was in a league for SiriusXM. It was like late 3rd round, and Andrew Luck was sitting there on the board. And the experts in the fantasy world, we all tend to kind of hold off on the quarterback. But Luck coming off a brilliant breakout season in 2014 with the addition of Frank Gore and Andre Johnson and Philip Dorsett, second year for Moncrief, it was an embarrassment of riches. I said, I can't pass on Andrew Luck. Well, I wish I did. In another league, I took Cam Newton as an afterthought in the 15th round. So you just can't take a quarterback too early. We need to be more wary of these running backs, no question about it. So really, the safest picks are these wide receivers. You can throw Gronkowski on there. So wide receiver, when in doubt, in the first round, because of all the running backs in the first round this past year, the only one to make it through the whole season was Adrian Peterson. And I don't know if we can count on him next year at 31 years old.
John, you know what I did in the first round of my very first draft? You know who I took?
Who?
Aaron Rodgers.
There you go. That's amazing. And even Aaron Rodgers not impervious to having a bad season here. So it's just unbelievable when you look at the league leaders this year at the quarterback position. Cam Newton, likely a 13th, 14th round pick. Blake Bortles, complete afterthought in terms of a starter. He's number 3 right now. Carson Palmer, having the best year of his career at 35 years old. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been outstanding. Andy Dalton, not a player that people were talking about. Heck, Kirk Cousins was a fantasy savior down the stretch here, and he's 13th at the position. So you really, really need to hold off on drafting a quarterback.
Well, and I want to piggyback on that. We're talking with John Hansen, the fantasy guru, fantasyguru.com. He's also on DirecTV's Fantasy Zone. What about running backs, Guru? I mean, you look at some of the dudes that are playing running back right now in the NFL. It's like, why draft Jamal Charles? Why draft these guys when you're almost better off waiting to see who ends up being the guy like Charkandrick West or somebody that fills in and ends up getting a lot of points?
No doubt. There's no about it. So my rule for running backs in the first round generally are the guy's got to be young, he's got to be durable, and he's got to be versatile in that he can help you regardless of the game situation. Now, a guy like Le'Veon Bell, I don't think we can call him durable at this point. He has had an injury in 3 consecutive years, but he's kind of a transcendent player as far as I'm concerned. He's one of the honestly, guys, he's one of the 10 best backs I've ever covered in 21 years. So I'll likely take a chance on Le'Veon Bell. Devonta Freeman, I think, is certainly in the conversation next year. He did miss one game, but he's been pretty darn durable. He's young. He's versatile. We'll see if Kyle Shanahan can return. Peterson would be a tough call next year. Tentatively, I just listed my top 12 running backs or top 12 players overall for 2016. I do have Peterson on the list here, but you're right. There's no question about it. These running backs, you can ignore the position for your first 4, 5, 6 picks and still be fine because, again, this year has been absolutely insane. It used to be you monitored who the backups are. Then the last couple of years, I'm like, okay, I'm going to monitor the practice squads. I think we need to dig that deep. Now I am monitoring couches. If there's an athlete sitting on a couch, I need to know about him because he could be signed off that couch and be a top 10 running back next week.
He is John Hansen, the fantasy guru, or according to Ross, just guru. Paul Burmeister and Ross Tucker sitting in for Dan Patrick here on this Tuesday. You mentioned a moment ago, John, the daily fantasy leagues. What do you think about what's happening there?
I think that it was inevitable. I think that the industry kind of exploded a little too quickly for everyone's tastes, and the commercials certainly did not help in terms of causing a little bit of an uproar. I don't think it's going away. I think that there's a whole generation of kids who are in their early 20s. They only know fantasy sports and they only know fantasy football. So they don't know a world without it. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think what will ultimately happen is it will be regulated. The governments will get their share of the pie. There'll be more consumer confidence, and it's going to stick around forever. We're not there yet. It may take a couple of years for all this to unfold, but I don't think the daily fantasy is going to go anywhere.
Awesome.
All right. Guru.
Thank you, Guru.
You got it, guys. Enjoy it.
It's much shorter than your 7-hour appearance here on Sundays.
DirecTV's Fantasy Zone, yep.
Closer to 7 minutes.
Last show on Sunday.
There you go. John Hansen, Fantasy Guru. Hey, thanks for your time.
You got it, guys. Later.